Welcome, everyone, to Practice Live. This is a monthly podcast conversation with folks from all over the world, from all walks of life and all backgrounds, talking about what it means to really be here. I am your host. I just started adding those words, Meg Viejos McCoy, and I have been obsessed with practice forever. And yeah, have been painting every day for like 3,500 days or something, and um, have been story catching for the last few years with beloved folks like Kelly, who I'm so honored is here today. I've known Kelly for a really long time, like, I don't know, at least 15 years, which is interesting because, like, it's not like we have been entirely close knit that whole time, but I have been watching this person's tattoos for the last over a decade, and love her art. And we have intersected in various spiritual communities. And Kelly is currently studying with me soul friendship, the art of companionship and community ministry. And we're in a conversation about how art and tattooing is totally community ministry. People are like locked in with you, for hours, usually coming to you with their stories of grief, of loss, of change of self-concept, dreams, and other important symbolism. And, you know, you're getting paid for the tattoo, but there's also so much about heart companionship and soul companionship involved in that. And it's such a pleasure, such an honor. I'm so excited to hear all of where we go today, which, we're starting with this seed, but we're likely going to go into all kinds of corners. And it's such an honor to have you here. And thanks for saying yes to this conversation. Kelly, what is important for us to know about you?
Wow. Well, thanks for having me and asking me to do this. First of all, that's like such a cool opportunity, and I love being in spaces that you host. Um, let's see. My name's Kelly Londot. I grew up in outside of Houston, Texas, um, which I always feels important, but I don't have roots there. I didn't grow up with a lot of like family outside of my nuclear family. Um, I've always been creative. I always had to make things. Um, I love to glue a thing together, you know what I mean? Like, um, draw something. Uh, I don't know. I even have memories of like a babysitter just bringing paper bags over that like grocery paper bags that we cut into hearts and decorated with markers. And it just like, I just even remember just a tiny awakening with that of like, yes, bring all your markers. Like, I want all the colors. And yeah, that's just led to a lot of exploration and identifying in that way of being an artist and creative. Other than that, I have a son who's 11 years old. He's super important to me. It's my little everything. And we homeschool. And I'm currently living in Maine. I love being here. I grew up in the South in warm places, so surprisingly, with all the seasons here, I do struggle with winters in some aspects, but I just like I love this state and its forests and lakes and rivers here are just some of the most nourishing things I've ever gotten to experience. And I have a tattoo studio. I've been tattooing for about 15, 16 years now. I have a studio on the Kennebec River and a mill that was built in the 1800s. And there's a little island out in the middle of the Kennebec called Swan Island that we're like positioned right across from, and that's where I'm at right now. I'm at my studio. Yeah, and it's just one of my favorite places to be.
Yes. Bring all the colors, all the markers.
All the markers.
Glue a thing to a thing. Um, can something I hear a lot in my practice and actually just in the world is um, struggle with identifying as an artist and as a creative. And I love how like easily and confidently you just said that. But can you talk a little bit about your process of like how you arrive? Like, was this just always a thing you were able to identify as, or was there any process around identifying as an artist?
I think there was in the professional capacity, like not as a person. I always knew that, and I was really lucky to go to like a college preview program at age 17 at the Academy of Art College in San Francisco, which I believe is a university now. Um, but I was 17. I was supposed to be in the college preview program, and they were like, in a very cool California way, like, do you still want to do it? So I was like 17, like totally unsupervised in San Francisco for several months, living in a college dorm. And I came home and had to do my senior year of high school, and I was like, you can't tell me shit. Um, but I knew then, I was like, professionally, this is the direction I'm going. And I had a lot of convincing to do with my family that that was the direction for college that was viable. And even after college, I did not feel hugely prepared to be a professional creative. Like, I had so much studio time and knowledge of materials and process. But the sustainability of being a creative professional, like, I had none of that because it wasn't, my college was so intense. There was nothing sustainable about it. Like,
I
like,
Yes, I do know. I'm totally interrupting you.
no, that's fine.
I didn't know we had this piece in common because I also went to a pre-college preview. Like I went to early college at Maine College of Art when I was 17 and then had to do my senior year after that and was
Oh,
like,
wow.
right.
I'm an artist.
I know how to like live alone in a dorm. But also the having gone through art school and coming out not prepared. In fact, like I basically ended up becoming leaning into my other soul passion, which is like soul friendship and community ministry, because
Yeah.
for some reason that actually felt like a more viable path professionally, even though I have always known that I'm an artist. And it wasn't actually until I went through the Milan painting program this last year where I was like, now I know how to be a professional, sustainable artist who like actually makes a living selling art. But because art school, particularly when we were going through school, was so conceptual and so like postmodern. I don't know, like it's like the conversation wasn't
Yeah.
actually about like making a living. In fact, I feel like a lot of my professors really they were making a living because they were teaching. They weren't necessarily making a living selling their art. And um so anyway, I would love to hear more on your thoughts on that because like both of us went to art school. I feel like
Yeah.
just now I'm sort of like actually living into my dream, my knowing of myself of being a professional artist.
Yeah. Well, and
Um
it's interesting. The school I went to was very commercial oriented, but like if you wanted to go be a graphic designer for Victoria's Secret, like they loved our college. Or if you wanted to go work for Disney as an animator, they loved our college. Um, and I was in photography, which was weird. I had so many painting teachers that were like, you were born to paint. What are you doing over there? And like, I loved all the technical processes, and I worked for the school. I ran the photo lab. All of our teachers did have to be working artists, but I still don't think it like prepared you for like what you were having to figure out financially. To provide for like creating. I got out of a photo program and I had realized I used all of the school's resources. I had nothing. So it was either like I was going to take out another loan or, and I was just so done with all of it. And I was waitressing. And my mom was like, and I was also learning to tattoo. And my mom's like, are you going to be a waitress forever? And I was like, so afraid to tell her I was learning to tattoo. I was like, yeah. Like I just went to this like private art school and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna waitress. And then like the tattooing thing fell into my lap. It was not what it is now. I had never met a female tattoo artist. I had tattoos. But like I was off on this like rogue journey after school and I was working in a tattoo shop and I was living in Florida. And basically like the people I was living with were opening a tattoo shop. And I was always talking about drawing and stuff. And then one day I was drawing at the shop and he was like, you can actually draw? And I was like, yeah, that's why I was always talking to you about it. And like, he was like, well, I didn't know. And like, why are you waitressing? Why aren't you doing this? And I was like, I've never seen a woman do this. Like, I'm not a big, scary man. Like I've only saw men that were tattooed like neck to knuckles, as I say, and like, while I was learning, I think is when they started doing like Miami ink and like they had like Kat Von D and stuff, and um, that like, so it was not like I have like young women come to me now about wanting to be tattoo artists. Like it wasn't something you sought out. It was like I was like, I had truly like gotten off the map, like as far as my upbringing, what I was
Wow.
used to. Like, I was in uncharted territory. Like most of the guys I learned from learned to tattoo in prison. So it's like, which is crazy. This is such a side note, but I have a stellium in my 12th house. And I recently realized that the 12th house is sometimes related to institutions like prison. And it's like, so I learned to tattoo around all these people that had like learned in prison, but it was like an interesting group that was always around there. There's a lot of veterans. I find veterans and former like people that have served time have a lot in common. Um, they police officers as well. Like they just had a group of men that was kind of always around, and oddly enough, they really looked after me. I was like a little sister.
This is amazing. This is amazing. Like in every way, like being taken under the wing, like that's like
Mhm.
how powerfully sweet, but also like yeah, forging new paths with like very few other women in your field at the time. Like, yeah, we had
Yeah.
Kat Von D and like I can't even name another woman at that time. That's really sad.
Yeah.
But amazing because the industry has completely changed in the last 15 years, like completely changed.
And a crazy thing I'm really proud of lately, which has nothing to do with me, but Maine has a long history of women tattooing. Oddly.
Rad.
Yeah, like I've just kind of put this together lately. And not just that, there was a woman in Portland she was tattooing in Maine for a very long time, but she was like doing spiritual tattooing. Like she was doing like Reiki with her tattooing, and like that was unheard of. Like I found
What?
her, yeah, I can't, her name's Jen. I don't know, I'll have to find her name. But and like it's only dawned on me recently like how unusual that is.
Kelly. So this actually feels like a really good segue to what you're in the energy. What are you in the energy of recognition of how like this conversation that we're in around soul friendship is intersecting with your tattoo practice? Also, for anyone who doesn't know, I am from Maine. So we're talking a lot about Maine because even though I live in Washington State, I'm from Maine. And Kelly and I met in Maine, and I'm proud of my home state having like a strong female faction of tattoo artists. That's like, yeah, that's not totally it's kind of surprising, but in some other way, not surprising.
Yeah. Well, and it was funny. I was dropping Arthur off at his homeschool group the other day, and the lady that runs it knew you. She was like, "Oh, Meg, I love Meg. Rachel Sugarman."
That's rad.
Yeah.
I love Rachel.
Yeah. Um, yeah, but where it's come, I know, and it's like, yeah, so with the tattooing, as far as where it's intersecting with soul friendship, I feel like from where I started, I kept slowing down and kind of refining the process. I suspected, even when I was like before I was tattooing and just receiving tattoos, like I could feel like an energetic piece to it of like the part of the body you were receiving something, kind of the exchange that maybe happened. And like not having any framework for that, I just kept showing up and kind of being present and like witnessing what's happening with me and the people. Like I would even like it was I was probably like 4 years into tattooing when I was realizing like I could take people's stuff home with me, like their energetics, and I had to be very careful. And I think that's where you always maybe saw a lot of like substance abuse with tattooing, of drinking or whatever, because of not acknowledging the subtleties of the exchange. Like you're sitting in someone's energy, you're interacting with their blood, which is like your family heritage, your DNA. Like, there was such a big piece of that. So it's like I kept trying to just create some space for me to observe and witness. So it was like, I feel like that was kind of the first step of realizing some of the cleansing aspects of like cleaning the space, finding ways to, cleanse myself post like working with people. And then a really big shift happened when I had Arthur, and I couldn't handle more than like one person's energy a day. Like I couldn't be hopping from person to person without like feeling absolutely miserable, um, and just run down. And like I think that's also where I started being a good mentor for other artists, and far as like how to like create like practices that you could be a tattoo artist in a way that was like sustainable for some longevity. Because that part of my intrigue with this art form was that I love things that there's no bottom to, that you could just keep going and learning and really just refining and finding aspects of it. And I felt that about tattooing right away. And I knew I needed to be able to be in this practice for a long time. I needed my body to hold up. I needed to not burn out. So as I created more space and started seeing less people, like something was happening, because I was doing everything like that like goes against your feelings of being in business or like making money, where I was like, no, I need to like be almost exclusive. Like I need my space to like I don't want everyone in my space. I'm looking for people that are aligned to work with me, and that like and that doesn't mean like they're like me. There's that doesn't mean they're like me.
Ooh. Ooh, talk about that. You and I know that you may not be able to like pull specific examples, but like can you suss that out a little bit more? Because and I'm gonna if you consent, I'm gonna say a couple things about this, because this is one
Yeah.
of the big deals about soul friendship. So something that I know about soul friendship is that it's not about sameness. And that can be really tricky, because we think soul and we think like I want to feel like absolutely congruent with somebody when I'm working in this intimate way. And some of the most potent soul friendship relationships I've had have been with people who are actually very different than I am. And we are offering each other things that we would not have access to. And if I like only limited my practice or my life to people who were like me, I think it would be very lonely and very like sad.
I
um,
agree.
um, and or like I feel like when I have had moments like that, I tend to be operating from an energy of like control versus encounter. And I really love in the health and vitality of my own practice to like be in the energy of encounter. Like encounter is a sustainability factor for me, and encounter means I don't know. Like there's a facet of the other person that I am holding in mystery, and I'm even holding facets of myself in mystery, and that creates a kind of sustainability because I'm sort of like forced to be at that edge of not knowing instead of thinking that I know, um, which is like dangerous to me, particularly in this realm of like soul friendship, which is akin to spiritual direction, which has been totally co opted, in my opinion, by certain religious entities, because it's an ancient practice of like elevated friendship. Um, and that elevated friendship is not like sameness. Like, anyway, I
Yeah.
would love to hear your thoughts around this of like, if it feels good and right to share some examples because we've talked about this a little bit in session work, but like
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and
I would
I've
love to
got,
hear your stories.
yeah, I'm like, there's definitely two people that are coming to mind. But I'll say, like, a few things that seems important to say is I don't know why these are always the wording around it, but this was my experience of God is that the person showing up to sit in your chair, you fill in all these blanks when you see a person and you have a conversation. You don't know them. And what people will show you is like by far more interesting than the story you've created in your head. Like, especially if you'll get over some shit.
100%.
Yeah.
It's so much more interesting when we get out of our own way.
Yeah. And like some of the best people have been ones that like I sized up and then I was like so wrong about. And like sometimes I've been probably kind of right. Like I have one gentleman that is like an older conservative veteran and he came in and was like I tattooed his son and then he came in and he was kind of like really playing into the trope that people like the box people might put him in and like complaining about like like sports teams not being able to be called Indians or something. And I like looked at him and I was like, Rick, we're evolving. Like, come on, keep up. And like after that moment, he was like, she's my friend. Like, like he was just like, this girl's gonna tell me what she thinks. And like we have, a closeness, whether or not like it's still sometimes like I'm not sure what to do with him. So, like if I'm like, oh, he's coming in, like, but it's like I've been tattooing him for years now. And like, I've tattooed his wife, and there's like such a sweetness in their relationship. Like, they met roller skating, and like, like it's just like, who would have thought? And he has ALS, he suffers greatly physically, and like, um, I think sometimes people say things because they're used to being around people that respond a certain way, or that's how the conversation goes. Like that's what the vernacular they're used to. And I think sometimes when you interrupt that, like people are allowed to be themselves more.
Oh, Kelly. Oh, yes to everything that you've said so far. But like that last piece is like so essential. Um, yeah, like we're in scripts and
Yeah.
we're in scripts of our assumptions of people in our and this isn't instead of the intuition. Like like when your system is lit up and you're like beware of that one. Like that's different than the head going like, I'm going to make up I'm going to make up all kinds of details that may or may not be true in order to protect what my idea of this person or even my idea of myself. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
because that is hard, is like figuring out what your different maybe body signals are or whatever, up to like what is a no and walk away from this, to like what is like a challenge to rise to, or to like a let be a force that helps you grow. Like, because that's why some of the people that stand out when you brought this up, where it's like there was so many times they were coming in, and I was kind of dreading the challenge that they brought to my space, but I stuck with them. And like I feel like, but there are people that I've been like, absolutely not, like, and I don't. I feel like it's such a subtle difference of how it feels to me.
Yes. What are you aware of if you're able to discern about the mechanics? Like, what are the mechanics of the differences of like, okay, I'm a yes, depending on like kind of how this process goes with you, or like I'm a no and thank you, goodbye.
I think, and this is just on the fly because I don't think I've tried to put words to this before, but I think there's some aspect of like control. I think some people like want to be in control in a way in their lives that like you will never be right.
And you can feel it.
Yeah.
Like you can feel it, like you can kind of feel that immediately if you're tuned in to those kinds of dynamics.
Yeah, because I experience a lot, because like with what I do, people have to surrender control, and that's a big deal. And so some of my practices have evolved on like I'm gonna steal control in these little moments and see how you react before we're even tattooing. Like, and part of that's like I don't necessarily show people designs before they come. Like there's space built into what we're doing that like we will never move forward in the process unless you're comfortable and like a total yes. So, and there's several points in the process to discern that. And you can, it's easy to discern, but like this took a lot of play because like I'm so sensitive and I was such a people pleaser and a doormat that like I would let people have control in the ways that made them comfortable for a long time, and I would just like be so angry about it inside. Like I would feel not trusted. I would stop trusting myself as an artist. I was like, you want to make the decisions, so like whatever the result is, that's on you then, right? Because you wanted to be in the driver's seat, but that's not how people see it. It's still your fault, like as a tattoo artist. So it's like playing with those dynamics is like it's so crazy, because I've had moments too where I've had to call people out of being like, your anxiety is making me freak out. Like, so either like that's on you. Like you wanted to be here, you wanted to go through this process, like some anticipation and excitement is like gonna be a part of it because it's a decisive moment activity. Like how the vibes are now is how the result is. Um, but it's like, yeah, if it's like so counterproductive and your emotions are so like out of like unchecked, like no amount of control you try to exert on me is gonna fix that. So
Yeah, totally. Oh man. So this surrender piece and also like like noticing what it's going to take for somebody to actually relax into it. Heard. There's like finesse to that in all things. Um so I can relate so much to everything you're talking about, but this piece about when people have like skin in the game, like when they're like, hiring you for something big. And in your case,
Mhm.
they literally have skin in the game.
Yeah,
um,
I never thought about that. Same.
um, I I recently got a commission, and I'm noticing that this process this time is going very differently because my own interior lineup is different. And so like, and this person is somebody that I really love and trust, and so that's really cool. But like, um, because I love and trust them, I was like, I'm gonna actually experiment with like making some like agreements around like what this process actually looks like, because I've done some commissions before that have just been the painting turned out cool. My experience was terrible because I was constantly like, I'm going to do everything that I'm going to bend over, like not only backwards, but I'm going to twist myself into a pretzel to make sure that you like it. um, and in this one, I'm beginning to find some like language around, you know, you're you're going to have to trust this process with me, because I have to trust this process. And like if we're holding this in a frequential way of trust, it's actually going to roll out like as best as possible. But if like any either of us are hyper controlling, or if I'm like manipulating another person essentially by like letting them control me, like no, it's going to end up being wretched if I'm like, I will give you a check of like every single time I make a move on this painting. Like no, like you get one veto like before I move to oils. And it's not going to be a nervous process. And something that I'm noticing actually is that for both of us in this current commission, we're both being worked by the painting before the painting's even happening. And this, I would love to hear your stories of experience around like that. Like when an invitation comes in and you haven't even like, started the tattoo, but the process is like working you, and or it's working them. But you're in a somewhat surrendered or agreed upon, in an agreed upon place.
I have a couple actually. Let's see. So with tattoo work, one of my friends was coming to help me in a convention, and she wanted to get tattooed at it. And I was really excited about her tattoo, and I was drawing it, and then she was like, wanted to change something that felt small to her, but changed the whole composition. And like, like sometimes people don't really know what they're asking if they don't create paintings or um, work with some of those things, that it's not just like, if you could you just move her hands, that it's like, oh, that's a big deal. Like, it's like the three things in a composition. What it's like the eyes, the hands, and the mouth or something that people look for first. And it was like I was like 5 redraws in, which I'm never redrawing this much, and I was just like, it just kept getting worse, and I was like falling apart, and I felt like because she was a friend of mine too, I felt like there was this like aspect of like I could feel the pressure coming from her, and like in my effort to rise to meet it, I was like devolving as an artist. We ended up never doing the tattoo, where I was just like, I can't, like, we can do something smaller. Um, and I've tattooed her more since then. But it's funny, she's a very intense, like, very, like, she is like a Scorpio, like a real, like, like she can have a very intense energy. So it was like kind of funny in that regard, looking back on it. But also, I'm interested with your painting experience because when I was finishing up my 500-hour yoga teacher training, my final project was a series of paintings. And I was going through a lot, and my female community was really big for me right then. And so the idea that I came up with my teacher was to paint women I know as female archetypes. So, like, invite them to either dress up, like, we would take pictures, and then I would create a painting from it. And then I did one of myself. I was kind of sneaky because I felt like I needed to be one at some point. and I like painted it. Someone asked to buy it. I sold it really cheap and shipped it off. It was like God. The thing was like it was just like a ghost in the night. But then a lady that was one of she went to the studio I taught at, which was Kara's studio in Portland, and she was like, "Can I commission you to do one of me?" So this felt like my full circle moment where it's like I was doing this project and then now she's asking to pay me. And it was so hard because I wanted her to like it so much. Like I kind of overworked it in a way. Like it was like still beautiful and it held a lot of like imagery and symbolism of like kind of like some of the things we were weaving into the painting at the time. But that was like, I wasn't sure of that one because when I'm painting, because I'm typically not painting with an agreement that it already belongs to someone. So, like when I tattoo, I know the person has to be happy with what we're doing. So, a lot of times, like painting is like my precious baby that I shelter and don't like ask much of. And like, so a lot of times when I'm painting, it's like just for my joy. And like, I do sell, I'm always selling my paintings, but it's like, I don't ask that beforehand of like, this needs to meet someone's approval. It's like, it needs to meet my approval. Like, that I like it, I say it's done, and I like varnished it and wired it and hung it or framed it or whatever. So that was interesting with that commission of like, yeah, because there was an energetic exchange and I didn't know her that well. And it was a huge painting. And I photographed, like, we met and we like did photos in the forest and like, you know, I don't know if I ever properly photographed it. I know I have pictures of it somewhere, but I don't have like, like print quality photos or anything because I didn't know what to do with the experience. I think that's why Soul Friend is such a big deal for me now. Like that I'm working through some of these things of like putting more language and structure to these dynamics because they're subtle and we want to go around acting like it's not real, these like feelings or whatever, but it is real. And especially like when you see it like in adjacent experiences or whatever, like it's there. So it is really nice with the way Soul Friend is working. It's so hard to describe to people what Soul Friend is. But it's like, which I mean, we've talked about that a lot in the group. But like somehow it's clarifying that and it's making me less afraid of those conversations and creating conversations around them.
That's rad. Love hearing that. Yeah, because there is so much intersection here with painting, the dynamics in painting. Again, I feel like it situates in this energy of encounter, of not knowing. And both realms, like painting touches that for me, and Soul Friend, like being in intimate conversations with individuals, but also circles, does that. Um, I used to paint more like what you were just talking about. Like I paint for my own pleasure. I paint like the subject matter and like the size and the palette that I want. And I've noticed that there's a profound energy that's coming from commissions. And it is for me this like a more direct intersection of soul friendship and painting, like how art is actually companionship. That like the object is obviously a beautiful, important facet of it. But painting translates bigger things than an individual. It always has, like paint, like art in general, like translates culture, it translates relationship, it transcends, it moves into a space that touches the holy, like not only the object itself, like in the realms of beauty, even if it's a conversation of anti-beauty, it's still touching that. But the creative process itself kind of positions you, um, with with creation. Um, I also didn't study painting. I'm loving how many intersections, like there's so many things that you and I have in common that I'm like finding out in this conversation. I studied printmaking and it was kind of a similar thing. I was like, well, the painting department, I was just like, this is too precious and too like, I just can't relate to how the community is around the painting community. So I went into print and loved the technicality, like loved nerding out about it, and also really loved the community around it. And I think I've always thought about art through a lens of community, and it has been like kind of weird for me to lean into self-expression, like, and yet I have painted for myself mostly as a therapeutic approach of like processing dynamics, not even like processing pain, but just processing dynamics and like my own like inner world, like the visions that have like bowled me over or dreams that have bowled me over. But as I'm doing more commissions, the intersection of the inner world, my inner world, and another person's inner world, and how like we can meet somewhere, like there's actually a physical place for us to meet. And tattooing does that too. It's like there's a physical place. Like when I look at my tattoos, I think about the inner life thing that inspired them, because they all have some tie in that way, but also the land that I was on when those tattoos happened. Like I have some from San Francisco, I have some from Bellingham, I have some from Maine, I have some from New Mexico. There's like different land relationships there. And those artists are with me permanently in some way. Like I reference them energetically when I look at my tattoos. Like it was never just about me and my skin and my story. It was the intersection and how we met there. And paintings do that too. And I love how much you're dropping into the subtle dynamics, the energetics of all of this, like your space, your practice, your art. It's rad. I love hearing like the fine tunement of your observations, and yeah, it's just lovely.
Thank you.
We're honing in actually. We're like almost 45 minutes in. That's nuts.
Wow.
Like I said, this hour before we hopped on, I was like, this hour goes by real quick.
Yeah.
I would love to hear if you have any words about like what practice means to you. Like what does practice mean to you?
I love this question. It makes me think of I remember being on Instagram one time and putting in my stories that I was like dropping in for my practice, which at the time I was referring to my yoga practice. And like someone was like, "What are you practicing for?" And I'm like, "Well, um, I feel like we need space. We need low pressure space to explore and to be in, but also like the aspect of like a training aspect of like creating a nervous system that can respond in higher stress situations in a way that you want it to. And I think that's why even a yoga practice or like I do a lot of artwork that I would call practice, even though it's still just as real as any other artwork I'm making, that it's just dropping in with that low expectation in order to be in kind of a lab space of observation and creation, because I think that's super important.
Yes. Yes. Oh my God. That was like, I would say watering, but it was like a waterfall. Yes, we need low pressure spaces to explore and to be in. And this feels like an adjacent point of, but creating a nervous system to respond to stress in a way that we want to. Yeah, and art that ends up looking like art that you would make in another way, but art that's approached through low pressure. I'm highlighting that for anyone who's listening because um, somebody in my practice, actually in Soul Friend, was asked this question. And I love this question, which is like, what is it that makes a practice a practice? And I'm like, it's the approach. Because I feel like the practice is going to have some anchor in the physical world. Like you're likely doing something. But there's to me a very strong distinction between achievement practices and the alchemy of practice. And the alchemy of practice really is talking about how are you getting in, how are you being in, and how are you transitioning out and bringing whatever it is that you found into your daily life, into the mundane. And there are paintings that I work on that I'm doing to like get better at painting or to paint a painting. And there are paintings that I make that end up looking like that because I've been painting for so long. But like the way that I got into the process of like listening, of responding, of being with, and how I got out of the practice was what made it a practice.
Yeah. Because I like this is the things. I feel like there was two things. I may have lost one of them. But the process, I feel like you hear people say like trust the process. But like the reality of that is like, especially in the creative sense of when you're making something, is like if you have a strong process, you know you can get out of whatever situation. You can turn it into something that looks good. Like, because there's always a point in the creative process where you're like, why did I choose this? What am I doing? Is this suck? Is this a piece of garbage? Like, there's like, you have to learn not to freak out in that moment. Like, know, like your process, like, you may not know exactly what it is that's going to get you to a finished looking product, but like, if you run through the process so many times, that's like doing the little paintings that it's like I feel like I would like intentionally try to make a mess and like then how am I going to get out of this creatively? And the part I think this was the other piece of it is sometimes we're told, A plus B equals C, and yeah, Pythagorean theorem, but like we're told like if we do this or this, we'll get this result. But like that may not always be the case with how you do something. So if you don't have a practice space to figure out what actually gets you to the result you're looking for, like it's not going to be it's not going to look like someone else's process. It's not going to be necessarily prescriptive. Like someone can't give you a prescription to how to do it. You need to have
That,
space. Yeah.
yes, that. Oh my gosh. Yes, no one else. No one else can tell us what our practice is. Like we have to keep going in. And there's so much nuance and paradox here because again, it might look like you're doing something, but that may not actually be the practice. Like painting looks like my practice, but painting is not my practice. My practice is visiting myself again and again and like listening. And you said something earlier of like, I love things that have no bottom that you can keep learning and keep refining. And it's for me, my obsession with practice. Like there's like no bottom to practice because there's always some facet that excites me to explore some eddy of every single day. Like I just kind of keep going there. And I love what you're talking about the resilience of continuing to show up means you increasingly know how to respond. I love what you said of like I intentionally make a mess so I can get out of it. um yeah. Like that's a
Yeah.
practice.
Well,
Allowing
and
ourselves to.
that intersection of gender with tattooing, where it was like at a point in my tattooing, I realized I always had like a man being like, you have to do this, you have to do this. And it's like that was a big piece. And when you're tattooing people, where it's like, where do you find what does your practice look like? Where's your experimental space or your like refining space, and like where are you finding your voice? And and that was a big thing for me of realizing that like my voice and process, not just because I'm identifying as a woman, that it may be different, but it just as an individual, it could be different than what someone else is telling you.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like even when I have been shown exact processes, I still end up finding some facet that is different than that is my own. And yeah, increasing in trust in that is profound. Oh,
Yeah.
well, we're honing in, Kelly. Look at your gorgeous hair. Your hair is so good.
It's like never all down.
I know. I don't think I've actually ever seen it all down. I'm like practicing having my hair up more. But I also, this is like maybe goofy, but I don't even care. And I'm going to show it right here on this like YouTube live. I've had like 3 dreams where I had a single dread or a braid with gold beads in it. And I'm pretty sure it's my Caribbean ancestors like coming through. And I was like, I'm just going to do it. And I like got these
Yeah.
like gold
I
beads on
thought it
Amazon.
was jewelry.
Nope, it's a braid. With my little like gold beads on it.
I love
Um,
it.
this reminds me because I got these beads on Amazon. This reminds me, even though we're not at this point necessarily yet, but it is here. Do you have things that people can find on Amazon?
I do on Amazon. I have a lot of just like lined journals that have my artwork on the cover. Some of them are hardback and some are paperback, and they're like little 6x9. I was looking around. I might have had one. I use them. So if you and I have a coloring book that's like I think it's called like Creative Mood Coloring Book, and it's a coloring book, but it's also just like random prompts and like spaces for lists and journaling because that's what I love and that's a big part of my process. And I thought it'd be fun to create something that encouraged people like, yeah, like color, but like if you needed to be instructed to fill something in, like what if I give you these other spaces to fill in? And I think if you just look up my name, Kelly Londot, all of those things should come up. Um, yeah, and find me on Instagram. Also, Kelly Londot. There's no space or hyphen. That's Londot. That's my favorite platform, so I love connecting with people on there.
Rad. Highly encourage everyone to find Kelly on there and keep track of her art and tattoos.
Mhm.
Um, Rad. I would love to invite. There's one person who's in this. Are there 2? There's one person in this back end, and I don't know if you happen to have any questions, Gina. But if you do, this would be a cool time to pop in. Until then, I'm curious if you might have a practice to share with us. Is there anything that like is there anything that feels like you could translate some part of how you show up with yourself or show in with yourself and how you might invite us to consider that?
This is so random that this is what is popping into my head right now, but I'll share it. I want to call it call and response, but it's not. I sometimes I journal of like writing the like I might write a little, but I will end it with a question that I'm asking a response for, and then I will write the response. Sometimes I've done it before where I'll try to write it with the other hand, but I don't feel like it's really necessary. But it's interesting to show up and kind of respond to yourself that way of seeing what comes through. And for some reason I find that it like cuts right to like what I need in the moment.
That's rad. That's rad. We can call it call and response. Yeah, asking yourself a question and then allowing your own answers to come through. Rad. You could totally do that in one of Kelly's journals. Oh, amazing. Is there anything else that feels important to share? Of which case, like we have a few minutes. I don't know why this is happening this early. I think it's because I transitioned to inviting you to share about what you have to share with us. But
With the
is there anything else
practice,
that feels
yeah.
like, is there anything else that feels important to share?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so.
Rad, Kelly. What a profound conversation. I love hearing about your journey. Man, you've lived in some places.
Yeah.
Texas, California, Maine, etc.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, to hear so much about your inner approach around art and around tattooing and the intersections, um, which I admit are partially selfish because the intersections with soul friendship, because we're in this like conversation around soul friendship. But I'm realizing how big that vision is, like this vision of soul friendship, because it is really subtle. And I love that you're like, I don't know how to talk about this with other people, and yet it's bringing clarity. And um, honestly, I hope that it lives in that zone, because instead of it being a framework within the current context that is like overly shapeable into to fit the system, I hope it actually lives in some way in which like there is always an energy of mystery or an encounter, and also that more and more people are able to like recognize soul friendship. I'm beginning to work on a post. I'm like, hairdressers, makeup artists, photographers, tattoo artists, you're all ministers. And of course, you may not call yourself that, but like these moments in which people are bringing their most precious inner world stuff, to a service like that, um, the more we can be in the energy of recognition of how we are actually hearts with ears in addition to our professions, I feel like the more satisfied this world will be, and we'll remember more belonging. We'll remember more of our own worth and each other's worth, and it won't be required. We won't be required to be the same to have that. So,
I think I will add this. I think it's part of what resonates with me is that there's been this aspect that I've met as spiritual as and how I'm meeting people, but I never wanted to dress up what I do too heavily to make it not accessible for everybody that was coming to see me. And I think there's something about soul friendship that is like it doesn't necessarily have to be like I don't want to feel like I need to like chant a mantra or like show up some sort of way to be meeting you. Like, and I love that the hearts with ears, where it's like to be meeting you in that regard. I've always wanted to just be me and do what I'm doing. And not, not feel like it was getting dressed up in some sort of way that felt not authentic. And I do feel that with like your approach with Soul Friend and just like, yeah, of what I was already doing, but like like giving it this other context or space.
yes, rad. We don't need to dress up a certain way. We don't need to perform spiritual. We're
Yeah.
not all Mary Magdalene types wandering in the forest with our lit candle and our crystals in our pockets. Like, it's not, no shame on that. But
Yeah.
like, some of us are, like it's raw. Like, I'm a fisherman's daughter. I'm going to cuss in the middle of my like sermon. So yeah, like really being ourselves and meeting each other as who and how we really are. Um, and that it's already something you're already doing. And that's the other piece that's like, it's funny to like create a certificate program wherein I'm like, you really don't need more certificates, and also come do this formational process with me so that you can really like own that.
Yeah.
um it's a little paradoxical, but like that's like primarily what humans have done, is that we've gone through formational processes to become who and how we already are, but with that conviction, with that clarity, with that with some of these pieces of nervous system resilience that you're talking about. Like, not because we always need to be resilient, because frankly, that's like not totally sustainable. But being able to meet ourselves with resilience and to meet each other in resilience when those moments are there. Um, yeah. And to like even have the no definition be enough, like be enough. Um, yeah, it's already something you're already doing. And
Yeah.
thanks for stepping into a formational process beside me in order to like step into it more.
Yeah. I will say I feel like that the window you gave it, like of it being a 2-year program of like, where it's like you said, where the certificate aspect may not be a part of it. I feel like that window has given me this space that
Mm,
I'm kind of like gestating in, that I'm like allowing things to wait till outside of it,
yes.
you
Rad.
know? So yeah, I don't know like what aspect of that is, but I've noticed that I'm kind of like with a lot of things, I'm kind of like we're in this 2-year space, and so things can wait till outside of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's rad. That's rad. I am thinking about because there are a few people who want to do Soul Friend and they need an accelerated version and they're already like facilitating. And I'm like, it could totally be
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
But honestly, I feel like a 2 and maybe even a 3-year process of like formation of allowing ourselves to be languid um in the reformation process, like in the like, yeah, because
Yeah.
everything does like shift and change. And this isn't, a thing that's hard in my practice in general is that like it's not necessarily achieving. It's not like learn this framework and apply it and like it'll be cool. Because again, we're doing work that's at the fringe of the system. Like we're not outside of the system, but we're at the fringe of the system and like sort of bridging into places that um, are even more into mystery and but also keeping our fingernails on the box.
Yeah. Yeah.
No big deal.
Well, and
Now we're
I
at
like I kind of
what I
go
want.
back and forth with that of like in the sense of achieving, where it's like I have things that are goals, or like maybe even kind of nastiest goals that they're just out there. But then like also I'm in a space of like pretty content, So it's like,
Totally.
I think that's an interesting place to be, like where I'm like, yeah, I want growth and stuff, but it's different than when I was younger.
That. Yeah, and that's the thing about practice and about soul friendship and about art is that like as you keep moving yourself into those spaces, it actually does achieve the thing.
Yeah.
Um, but we're talking, I feel like we're talking about like an approach to it and it's subtle. It's a little ineffable. It's a little hard to put words to.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
babe,
It's interesting.
thank you. Thank you for
You're welcome.
all of this and sharing your presence and your voice and your wisdom. It's truly rad to hear more of your story and I love how many things I learned about you today. It's awesome.
Right? Like we thought we knew.
We thought we knew. And there's always more because
Yeah.
we're never done. We're just like never gonna get it done. Thank you so much for saying yes. And I so look forward to more folks hearing this. And for you who are here, for you who are listening later, this conversation usually happens on the third Friday of every month at 11 a.m. Pacific live on YouTube. Next month might be a little bit different because I have an appointment that's going to maybe intersect. And so it might be on Thursday. But to be announced later. If you want to stay in the know, you can join my mailing list or subscribe to this channel. That would be lovely. And if you want to learn more about my work, you can go to innerlifecreations.com. And I also have things on Amazon. I have a practice planner, which I have right here because I work in my own practice planner all the time. And this is it's funny to promote a planner in May, but It's open date, so you can hop into it at any time and be supported, and support yourself in the nuance of practice, which is so much of what we're talking about in these conversations. And please find Callie's coloring books and notebooks, coloring book currently. There'll probably be more, and notebooks on Amazon. Thank you all, and we'll catch you next month.